Welcome to Rges Pre-Algebra. This is Lesson 15A. We're discussing sections 425 and 426, talking about the topic multiplying signed numbers. Now, let's review for just a minute here. If we're adding signed numbers, and you have the number line in your mind as a paradigm, if we're taking a plus 7, or positive 7 and a positive 3. Of course, we could as easily have written that as 7 plus 3, and all positives would be what we've done since we were very young, and of course that would be 10. If we're thinking about it on a number line paradigm, we would start at 0, we're going positive 7 and positive 3, and we're summing, and we would get 10, positive 10. Now, if we recall, if we're going in the other direction, and we start at 0, and we're going negative 7 plus negative 3, we are going in the same direction both times, and so we're going to get negative 10. But if we do something like positive 7 plus negative 3, recall that if we're thinking about a number line, we would first go in the positive direction and then in the negative direction. And so what we have here is we need to take the difference between 7 and 3 because we're first going in one direction and then in the other. So it would be a 4, and our question is, do we need a positive 4 or a negative 4? Well, we went first in the positive direction, and when we went back, we went less than we had gone forward, or we went to the left less than we had gone to the right. And so it's going to be a positive 4. And then the last example here, concluding here, if we had gone negative 7 plus a positive 4, let's say, we would, on the number line, go first in the negative direction and then in the positive direction, but we are going to the right less than we went to the left. We're still taking the difference between the 7 and the 4 because we're going in opposite directions, but this time we end up to the left of the 0, or negative 3. Now recall that when we're talking about subtracting numbers, we're going to go, let's say, negative 3 minus a negative 4, and we are going to change this operation, currently subtraction, to an addition operation. So the first number doesn't change, whatever it was, but if we're going to subtract, it is the same as adding the inverse. So this becomes the inverse, no longer negative 4, but positive 4. And now we have an addition problem. We're going to go negative 3 in that direction, positive 4 in that direction. The difference between 3 and 4 is 1, and we end up on the positive side of 0. Okay, so that's what you've learned so far. Now today we're going to talk about multiplying signed numbers. The rule for multiplying signed numbers is very, very simple. If we have a positive times a positive, for instance, 3 times 4, that would be what you've always done, and that is 12. 3 times 4 is 12, and it's positive. If I have a negative times a negative, for instance, negative 3 times negative 4. Now recall what this looks like, or what this represents. Let's get that a little neater. A negative times a negative is a positive, and 3 times 4 is 12. So whenever our signs are the same, either both positive or both negative, the answer will be positive. If the signs are different, either a positive times a negative or a negative times a positive, that would look like 7 times negative 2. Recall when I just have the number right up next to a parenthesis, that means multiplication. Okay. Or a negative 3 times 5. In either case, you have to recognize that this is multiplication, not addition or subtraction, because my number is right next to the parenthesis. That's sometimes a little challenging for students. So make sure that you recognize this as a multiplication and this as a multiplication. This becomes a positive times a negative. The answer will be negative, and 7 times 2 is 14. A negative times a positive, the answer is also negative if the signs are different, and 3 times 5 is 15. So when the signs are different, the answer is negative. And that is almost all there is to it. Now, what if I had several things being multiplied together? Like, let's say, negative 2 times 3 times negative 5 times negative 1 times 2. Notice what I have is 3 negatives. I only have to count the negatives, not the positives. If there is an odd number of negatives, every 2 of them would pair to a positive, so an odd number of negatives would make a negative answer. An even number of negatives would make a positive answer. So what I like to do when I get a lot of numbers being multiplied together like this, I just simply like to count the number of negative signs, 1, 2, 3, and so my answer will be negative, and then I go back and multiply numbers. Okay, we got 6 times 5 is 30 times 2 is 60. Just like that. Okay, so I don't think you're going to have too much struggle with this. These are pretty straightforward ideas, actually much easier than addition and subtraction. So your rule, again, very simple. If you have the same sign, either all positive or all negative, 2 positives or 2 negatives, if we're just looking at 2 numbers, your answer will be positive. If you have different signs, when you only have 2, 1 positive and 1 negative, or the first one negative and the second one positive, your answer will be negative. And when you have 3 or more, count up the number of negative signs. If it's an odd number of negative signs, then the answer will be negative.